Hello, everyone, and welcome to Aucademy. My name's Katie Monday. Some of you might know me as Autistic and Living the Dream. And I'm joined today by Meghan Ashburn, who's also known as Not an Autism Mum, and Jules Edwards, who's Autistic Typing. And they are both here today to talk about their new book, I Will Die on This Hill, Autistic Adults, Autism Parents, and the Children Who Deserve a Better World. Just before we get started, we usually just do a physical, well, just if you can, because I know you're very busy people, just like 2 lines about what you do and like kind of within the community, if you will, and then like a little physical description. So I'll start first with a physical description. So my name's Katie Monday. I'm they, them. That's the pronouns I use. And I'm actually in a different room today. Not in the front room. I'm upstairs. So behind me is not my green old lady curtains. It's kind of like a very potentially chavvy crushed velvet affair going on behind me, which is great. I've got my usual kind of very messy short hair, which has kind of got a fringe. And I've got my big orange and brown glasses on so I can see everyone and what's going on. And yeah, I don't know that I have any other interesting features than that, if I'm honest. Jules, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Jules, and I'm sitting in a light gray room with white shelves full of shiny beads behind me. I am a light-skinned Native American woman with a headband with a bow on my head. And what I do, I'm just a blogger. Megan's going to laugh about that. No, so I'm a writer and disability advocate. I do a lot of advocacy locally in my state.
Okay, perfect. And Meghan?
Hello, I'm Meghan. My pronouns are she, her. And what do? I have a blog and I write, and I have a book club on Facebook called That Awesome Book Club, and I do education consulting, and my passion is inclusion and AAC and accessibility. I am a white woman. I've got my hair pulled back in a ponytail today, and I have my I joke about this, that it's my Mr. Rogers gray hoodie because I wear it all the time. I've got my gray hoodie on, and I'm sitting in front of my bookcase with all of my great books behind me. And I have glasses.
Do I see Nick Walker's Neuroqueer on that
Yeah,
bookshelf?
you do. Yes, you do.
Oh, that's a spot.
and we had Nikki on in the book club not too long ago, so that was amazing.
Oh, perfect. Brilliant. Yeah, she was on here in Aucademy a little while ago now. She's been with us a couple of times here. We love her. We love her work.
Smart.
Yeah. So when slightly different, because usually all of our guests on here are usually all autistic, but not quite today. So usually I ask, when did you find out that you're autistic? But I can also ask that about your children as well. Meghan, again, I'm going to start with Jules. I'm just starting with Jules today because she's closest to me on the screen.
I prefer that, actually.
Meghan does prefer that. She'll point people in my direction. When did I find out I'm autistic? It was not that long ago. I think it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago that I figured it out. And it was after my children were diagnosed, and I was kind of like, let me learn all about this. And then I'm like, wait, that's not everyone. Everyone doesn't do that. What? And then here I am, autistic.
And Meghan, is it twins that you have? Do you have 3 children or 2 children? I can't remember.
Well, I have 4 children, and my younger 2 are twins, and they're autistic. And I found out around the same time Jules found out that she was autistic. I guess it's been about 6 years or something like that. And yeah, I don't identify as autistic. I have ADHD. I've been that way forever. I never even knew that was neurodivergent until I met the autistic community. I never even called myself that. I used to call myself neurotypical. I didn't know that term
Okay.
Yeah, I have ADHD since forever. I don't know, in college. Yep.
Okay. Okay. It's interesting because you both found out about your kind of family neurodivergence, if you will, and you talk about in the book you talk about how you first met each other online as well, and how that wasn't quite the the relationship you have with each other now. I didn't know if you wanted to touch on that at all.
Yeah. So I found Megan's blog, Not an Autism Mom, as I was just figuring out my own neurodivergence. And a lot of the content she posted, I could relate to it a lot because we are in very similar parenting spots. Like our kids were newly identified and we're trying to shuffle through all of this information, misinformation, trying to sort through and figure out like what's real and what's just crap. how do we make this work for our families? And a lot of the stuff she posted I really liked, but some of it was kind of like, dude, do better. And so she called me a troll. She tells me I called her a martyr mom. I don't remember that. I do remember saying you are an autism mom and puzzle pieces and all that stuff, all of that. And so that's how we met initially.
Yeah, that's a pretty good synopsis. And I will say that I think Jules, like if we're like having information dumping into our heads, if you can just imagine that, like Jules had a lot of better information. Like Jules had found the autistic community a little like before I did. And so like I'm just over here getting funneled with all this crap. And Jules, Jules did have better information coming in than I did. So
Okay. And
yeah.
do you think that's because I could ask you loads of questions, but I should talk about the book really because that's what we're here to talk about. I found it really interesting. I wrote I was very lucky to get a online copy of your book, which I believe is out in January next year.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? And is that people can get that through the kind of usual bookshops and kind of Amazons and everything else like that?
Yeah, it's up for pre-sale now everywhere.
Oh, okay. Oh, I need to sort that out then. Write that down. I thought it was coming out in January. I think I'll get that in January.
Yes, it's January. It's up for pre-sale on like all the major platforms. It's kind of exciting to see our names on like Barnes and Noble and Amazon and stuff. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Do you have any idea? I don't know how it works, but do you have any idea how many pre-sales you have at the moment, or is that just something that will surprise you in January?
They'll be like, surprise! Yeah, yeah. It really bothers me a lot to not know.
Yes.
That's a long time to wait, isn't it? There's a long time to wait. How many people did you end up sending a copy for review? Do you know, ish?
Maybe 30 to 50, maybe. I don't know.
And you said you got a lot of positive feedback from that, so which is brilliant. Like I've got to say, I was not expecting, having followed both of you and quite a lot of the other people who write in the book, Christy Forbes, Cole Sorensen, Danny Whitty, Kieran Rose, and the whole, actually pretty much all of the people in the book. I was not surprised by the quality of the writing and by how critical it was. But I think what I was surprised by was how emotive it was in parts, which I wasn't necessarily expecting. I think, just trigger warning, that I'm just going to talk about family breakdown and kind of harm and filicide for the next minute or so. I think Kara's chapter on her story about how she calls her mother in inverted commas, and about how her mother felt that she couldn't look after the children and then ended up killing two of her autistic children and then trying to kill herself as well. And it just highlights like the real harm that autistic people face, every single day. And the idea that families are supposed to be kind of safe spaces is very much not an experience of quite a lot of us. And I just wondered if you had anything to add to that at all.
I have a lot to add to that. So Kara is my real life friend. Like, she's local to me, and our kids have played together, and she's my real life friend. And she actually, her diagnosis is pretty new herself. It was after we became friends that she found out her own diagnosis. But I think it's really important to talk about these hard things because we can prevent it. And with absolutely no sympathy for parents who, commit filicide, we can prevent it by intervening, by making sure that parents have the right supports. And even if that support is finding a safe place for their child to be that is away from them, there is stuff available. The systems are crappy. I'm going to try not to swear. The systems are crappy.
Oh, feel free to swear. That's fine. It's not a problem.
Okay, well, the systems are shitty. They're terrible. And I understand how difficult it can be to navigate the systems and ask for help and stuff. But I mean, if all else fails, you go to the ER and say, I can't safely parent this child. There has to be a crisis plan. Because as much as we would like to stand in righteousness and say this is an evil person and condemn them after the fact, we still need to do the work to prevent acts like that. So one thing that I do locally is I participate in co-hosting the Disability Day of Mourning. I'm not sure if that's something that happens everywhere. I know it's March 1st, and we host a vigil. And here in the U.S., we read the names of victims of filicide, and it takes hours. And it's heartbreaking every time. But then we think about why are we here and what can we do to prevent adding new names to the list? So yeah, it is very difficult topic, and it hits close to home for me and for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so much just abuse and neglect within kind of neurodivergent families as well. And I work with a lot of neurodivergent young people, and every new year when I get a new cohort in, there's more looked after children. There's much more complex kind of family connections, and it's certainly something I've noticed after the last 9-10 years of working with children. It's just progressively, I think the disabilities stay the same, if you will, but the complex personhoods of the people that we're working with, or we are, or the people we love or support, whoever it is just getting much more complex. I just wanted to talk about Nathan McConnell as well, doing the drawings of Growing Up Auti fame. Just wanted to put Nathan out there as well. It was really lovely to have. I'm a very visual person, and I have a feeling that a lot of people who are going to read this book are quite visual people. So having like the cheeky little pictures of Kieran and Christy and everyone, and you two as well, and everyone else who wrote on there was like a really nice touch. And I also really like the front cover for it as well. I just wondered, so you said obviously that Cara is a close friend of yours. I wondered, when actually just in general, when did you have the idea of Our relationship's quite interesting, and it could possibly tell a story to others on the autism community and the autistic community, and how we could work better together. When was that an idea, to start writing the book?
That's a good question. So Megan actually voluntold me to read to co-write. Yes. And I love it. Sometimes she does that. But Kara, when we were discussing, when Megan and I were discussing writing the book, we wanted to make sure that as many different topics were addressed and as many different people with diverse backgrounds were represented. So we took a lot of time kind of brainstorming, like, who should we invite to join us, and what are the important topics to talk about? Because our book is not like the complete conversation. It's an invitation to start these conversations and to have difficult conversations. Because a lot of the time it's autistic people versus allistic parents. And it's just like, I'm right. No, I'm right. And it's a big fight, but a lot of people don't want to engage in the nuanced conversations about, you know, we don't live in an ideal world. We live in the real world, and we have to operate and live within systems that don't work for all of us. And we're stressed out. We're all stressed out because we have to live in societies that are not built for us. So inviting people to have the conversation is why we decided to write this book together.
And I feel like the people that we invite in, for the most part, are doing that same work, like within their own communities and trying to reach out to other communities. Because, like, I think for Jules and for myself, like, intersectionality is like everything for us, because we don't live in like this like one little world that is not touched by everything else. I mean, like, I think that was a big part of deciding who we were going to ask, to make sure that we had so much representation, just like all over, like over all of the intersections. And that was just a big thing for us, to make sure everybody was represented.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that you have, you know, non-speaking people, especially. It always seems to be, and Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous people as well. Obviously, it always seems to be, you know, a thing that we can't seem to escape in the autistic community. Like in all places in the world, you know, kind of white speaking people seem to be the most visible, and is trying to, I don't mean this in a patronizing way, but it's trying to raise up other voices as well, because what they bring with them. I mean, Danny Whitty's was probably my favorite chapter, actually. And that was very emotive as well, because I can't remember the quote exactly, but it's something like, you know, if parents or carers don't get to know how their children communicate, then, you know, they're missing out on a wonderful opportunity to know their children and to love their children where they are. It wasn't that at all, but it was something of that ilk, that I was just like, yeah, you're really missing out on your children. I just couldn't think of anything worse, really.
Yeah, Danny's story is just, it is emotional just in general, and just hearing him talk about it and write about it is emotional, and it's one that needs to be, you know, shared with parents, especially parents of non-speaking or minimally speaking kids.
Yeah, absolutely. You've just answered my next question, anyways, because I was going to ask about how you decided who was joining in with writing. Did you get in contact with other people, or did they show interest, or how did that work?
So we kind of got a list together, and then we reached out to them, and a lot of them we work with in other areas. So it was kind of easy to get that. I mean, some people did say no to the book. You know, some people said, you know, we're not interested in this. This is not like my wheelhouse, kind of, and we totally respect that. Like, not everybody wants to do this type of work in the way that we do it. So, and that's fine. I mean, I think that there's room for all different types of advocacy, but the one, you know, most of these people we either know or we've been working with. I think I've had most of them on in the book club at one time or another. And Jules does work. Jules does a whole lot of local advocacy work and disability justice work that, like, her resume is a mile long. And so a lot of those people she met, you know, some of them she met at home, like in her own work.
Okay. Okay. And you said you were just a blogger. Why do you say this? Not true. You're the person on the ground actually doing proper work, whilst people like me just sit here talking about it. You know?
So it's actually some dismissive thing that somebody said to me one time, and so now I think it's hilarious to say, and I'm like, all right, that's fine. I'll take that.
I'm just a blogger. Yeah.
Because it's really hard for me to have like attention on me and as a person, because I'm more of like the behind the scenes, like doing the work kind of thing. Like, that's why I blogged anonymously for years. And so, like, coming out into the public is really difficult for me. But I also know that if I don't, if I'm not visible with the work that I do, then I'm not setting an example for others of like, hey, here's how you can get involved. This is what you can do. So, like, I'm on a number of different boards. So, like the ARC Minnesota, I'm on their board. I started a nonprofit organization locally with some friends who are also neurodivergent. I am the elected chairperson for the Minnesota Senate Autism Council. And like, so I do a lot of real life stuff. But it's funny when people kind of like pigeonhole me as like just a blogger, just a writer, because I do a lot more than that.
Yeah.
It's so important that you talk about that too, Jules, because I mean, so many of these things, like, I never even knew existed until just a couple years ago. And like, it wasn't until like Jules showed me the Partners in Policy Making. She talked to me, like, she did the LIN program. I don't know what that stands for because acronyms are my nemesis, but it's something about education. And
do you want me to tell you?
Yes.
LEND is Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental Disabilities, and it's a nationwide program in the United States, and it's offered throughout universities throughout the country.
And the CX, like, I didn't know any of these boards even existed until like Jules and a couple other people who were doing advocacy work locally, like, told me about them. Like, how do we have one of those here? I want to like help get involved, you know, but it is important that people do talk about themselves, even as hard as it is, because people like me don't know anything about them.
Yeah, I suppose so. Because I think it was the final chapter of your book, or like one of the final chapters was about like, so what can people do to get involved? Like the readers of the book, what can we do to get involved and help autistic people and autistic children? And I just wondered if you wanted to go over your kind of favorite one of those. I don't know if, because there was talking about I don't think you call them PTAs, parent teachers associations.
Yeah.
In America, I don't know if you call them the same thing. It's about getting involved with PTAs and stuff like that. But is there anything that, if you think, if people who are reading it only got involved in one thing, what would be the one thing that you think would make the the biggest amount of difference to the autistic community?
I don't know how to answer that.
That's fine.
No. Honestly, I think it's really important to get involved locally, however that looks for individuals, because not everyone is going to be a national advocate or an international advocate. And we can make the biggest difference in our local communities by getting involved locally. So that might be the PTA, or in my state, I don't know if it's like this all over the place, but school districts here have special education SEEK. So it's Special Education Advisory Committee or something.
Yeah,
I think that's what it's called. And so parents can get involved there and it's volunteer work. A lot of it is volunteer work. It's so much of disability advocacy is unpaid. But I mean, it really depends on a person's capacity. For like, do you have time to go somewhere or join a meeting every week or every month or every quarter? So there's not one specific thing, but I think it's important to start locally, like start in your community, and then if you build up to something bigger, great. But like those relationships that you build with other people locally are so important.
I think it also depends on your interests and like what you're able to do. Like, so I did the Partners in Policy Making program this year, but there's no way I would have been able to do it before, because this past year it was virtual. And normally I would have had to drive to wherever in our state like once a month, and that would have never been able to be a possibility for me. So virtual options like really helped me be able to get involved. And like I'm on the SEAC for our school board, and not everybody wants to do that kind of stuff. I mean, even if you just go to like your place of worship or something like that and say, hey, if anybody needs some IEP help, which is in America, that's individualized education plan, I believe. But like helping families with like navigating the special education process. If you just go, like if you volunteer to go with a parent who is struggling with their kids' special education plan. I mean, it can be that small, but that's not even a small thing. It's huge. It's huge.
I think I see that a lot, and I feel like you might too. Like I see that a lot on autistic advocacy and disability advocacy and activist kind of sites, especially in the face of like some really heavy hitting stuff with applied behavioral analysis, the JRC kind of shock treatments that are still continuing, and the Spectrum 10K that is still carrying on now, the big research for which is basically gathering 10,000 autistic people's DNA within England in order to create better well-being support services for autistic people in England. That is just done by the same people in Cambridge University that just says, you do not have autistic people's well-being at the center or even at the side of what the hell you're doing. And I think some people can feel like their contribution online or otherwise is really small, and trying to explain to people that you're never just a blogger, or you're never just someone who you're just sharing something. Like, at the peak of the kind of boycott Spectrum 10K kind of activist work over here, that got trending on Twitter. So even if it's just a small little tweet that you've put out saying, I don't agree with this, and it doesn't have to be academic and it doesn't have to be highfalutin, it just putting your little thing out there into the world can make such a massive difference. And I think that's really difficult for some people to say, I make a difference on a daily basis just doing the small, and I don't think anything is small, but the small things that I do. And I think that comes across in I Will Die on This Hill as well, because, you know, as I was saying with your chapter at the end about all the different things you could get involved with, there's lots of different ways that people, and obviously we all like have our different interests and different strengths and different access needs and stuff. So it's important to be able to have like several different ways of being able to get involved, which I think you talk about quite well in the book.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, getting involved locally is very important too as well. But like we have, so where I live in the UK is a little harbour. It would be a city. Do we have a cathedral? It's a town called Portsmouth, and we have a lot of disabled people in Portsmouth. Like I don't know if this is the sea air or what, but there's a lot of us there, and the disabled community is amazing. And we all seem to know each other, and there's a real, I know people would like to use the word community for all sorts of different groups of people, as if, you know, I'm bisexual and therefore I know every bisexual that's ever existed in the world. Like people talk about communities like that, don't they? And it's just complete nonsense. But I find that with local communities, I feel like that can actually be a thing. I don't know if that's how you feel as well, Jules, with the work you do.
I think so. I feel like small moments can be really big in impact at times. And you, like, sometimes it's hard to like find the right words sometimes also. But like there's a few years ago, and this is prior to the pandemic, my car broke down and I had to use Uber to go to and from work. And it was kind of like a thorn in my side, right? And I was not real thrilled about it. But one day I was on my way to work and my Uber driver and I started talking, and I don't typically talk to strangers, but it was just like, hey, all right, it's cool, whatever, let's just talk about stuff. And we got to talking about autism, and he's like, yeah, I think I'm autistic. And, you know, he starts talking about the difficulties he's going through. So he was homeless at the time. He was living in his car that he was driving Uber with, and he was having health issues and stuff like that. And I was able to help him get connected to some services, and I helped him get a house, or not a house, but an apartment. He had his own home within 2 months or so. We got him connected with some services and the supports that he needed, including health insurance and stuff like that. And it's like, you never know when you can make a huge impact in one person's life. So that's not something I would put on my resume. But that's something that makes me feel good about the work that I'm doing. And I do have his permission to share his story. I'm not just, you know, doing the thing where we're exploiting people. But that's just one of those things where you never know when an opportunity is going to come along that you can really change somebody's entire life. But yeah, and disabled people are everywhere, and you can't tell who has a disability because, hey, invisible disabilities exist. So.
Absolutely. And I think it sounds really strange, but I went to it was so lovely. So I went to a soft play with my little boy, and I came out of the cubicle in the toilet and I went to go wash my hands, and there was a little boy who came in with his mum, and she was saying to him, oh, this person's just coming out of the cubicle, so you can hear the toilet going, and then they're going to wash their hands, and then they're probably going to use the hand dryer, so that's going to be quite noisy. And obviously I could hear the mum saying this. I said, don't worry, I'm not going to use the hand dryer. And she said to me, no, if you want to use the hand dryer, use the hand dryer. And I said, you know what? I said, I'm autistic and I don't like the sound of hand dryers, so I'm not going to use them. And this boy's face absolutely lit up. And all I could hear, so wash my hands, obviously gone, and they were doing whatever they were doing. And I could hear the boy going, they're autistic too, and they don't like hand dryers either. And then the mum could say, yeah, it's quite usual for people to not like hand dryers, and you don't know who's autistic and stuff like that. And I just thought this is just a random, completely and utterly chance meeting of two people in a bathroom.
Right.
And then to make such a difference to a 6-year-old, 7-year-old boy who probably hasn't actually had that much interaction with other autistic people, and it was it was really lovely actually. I came out of the bathroom, I was like, oh, that's really nice. So I think sometimes it's just really strange, not in the same area as what you were saying about helping the fella get his house, but it's all those little things that, as a late diagnosed person, like if I had known I was autistic and ADHD at the time, but I'd also just known that there were other people out there who had the same kind of odd tendencies that I did, that would have been really, really helpful to me. Because obviously you were late diagnosed as well, Jules. Do you think that, and how do you feel when an earlier diagnosis would have been like? Oh, actually, Meghan, you were late diagnosed ADHD, weren't you?
Yeah, in college I
Yeah.
was. Yeah, I mean, I had all of the things in high school, like, how they do all the diagnoses around what's actually happening, like the depression and the, eating disorders and all of that in high school. And finally, I found somebody that was like, you're ADHD, like a therapist. I was going to a therapist. She was like, you're ADHD. And I was like, no, I mean, I'm not hyper. I mean, look at me. I'm not hyper at all. I mean, that's my thing. That's what I knew about it, was it's like the hyper kids that like, whatever. And she was like, no, Meghan, it's not about like what you look like on the outside. Don't you see you're like doing this with your feet and you can't be still. And I was like, well, I guess I thought everybody did that. So, but yeah, I talked about that in the book, and it really did change my life. Like, I went from failing out of college, however many semesters, to graduating with honors. Like, as soon as I was identified and got some meds, and it's really helpful for me. And I didn't know anybody else. I mean, I just didn't, like girls growing up. This is 20 years ago, so I didn't know anybody else that had ADHD like me. Just a boy.
Did you find that the kind of first experience of the kind of other people who are neurodivergent or ADHD, was that mostly online, or?
I mean, I didn't even know the term neurodivergent until, I mean, it was a couple years after I found the autistic community. I mean, I heard, like, I was reading, I was doing a lot of listening and learning, but I didn't connect the neurodivergent term to me, because like my situation, I mean, I'm the first to say, like, I grew up fully supported. Like, I am the fully supported. My mother, like, my eating habits, like if I didn't want to eat something, she would make me another meal and never make a big deal out of it. Like, if like I love sensory things like velvet and silk, and she would make me blankets. Like, it was never like you're doing something wrong, Meghan. I never felt like that. So like, I just thought that it was just normal. I mean, or typical for everybody to feel the same way I did. And then it wasn't until, I mean, it was a couple years after I found the autistic community. I was like in one of the groups, in one of the learning groups, and I was like, so are you saying I'm neurodivergent? And they're like, yeah, Meghan, because I always said I was neurotypical in the beginning. Didn't I, Jules? I was like, I'm a neurotypical parent.
You did. And I don't think you were even open about having ADHD.
I didn't think that I did not like connect the dots there. I just, in my true ADHD form, I didn't connect the dots that was like, totally oblivious. totally oblivious.
You mean out of sight, out of mind, which is a very typical ADHD experience.
Yeah, like I was just totally oblivious to it because I always just thought that I was neurotypical. I always did.
You are not neurotypical, but you are autistic, which is not a slur. Sometimes people think that that's like a slur or an insult, and I'm like, in what way? It's just a descriptor. But
So
sometimes
strange.
people get like very sensitive about words being applied to them. Like,
Yes, I do a lot of trans and non-binary kind of activist work, and yes, the word cisgender also completely riles some people up. I don't know, just really, really strange how
Interesting.
the others of us are supposed to have labels, but not this group of gendered people, because they don't need labels because they're obviously the normies. So why would they need a label? It's really frustrating. It's interesting because allistic or allistic is non-autistic people, but you could also be neurodivergent as well. And I think sometimes people get allistic and neurotypical confused.
You definitely need a Venn diagram to help you sort all of this out. Like I am a Venn diagram type of person, and that is helpful to have one of those.
Sai, who's one of our educator learners, created I'm not going to say this correctly, a Euler diagram of explaining this. I'm hoping that Ben can find it and pop a link into this video. That'd be fantastic. Because that's about how it's not a Venn diagram because it's not necessarily about overlapping, but it explains the hierarchy as opposed to the overlapping of things. So it's more about like the power structures within different neurotypes, which was really, really interesting. But yeah, I feel like a Venn diagram with so many of us having co-occurring things going on. I feel like the Venn diagram would just be.
It would need lots of circles, like little oblongs, like going in.
That's it. Bubbles forever. Yeah, so I find it because going back to your relationship when it first started out, it's interesting how it started in kind of rocky grounds, but now like I feel with the book, I found like it's almost created a blueprint for how autistic activists and holistic or neurotypical parents can kind of interact with each other in order to get the best. I mean, we talk about autistic children quite a lot. You talk about autistic children quite a lot in the book, but obviously it's better for adults as well. So I just wondered if you had anything more to say on that. Like, how do there was a lot of analogies about building bridges and building bridges between different hills that we want to die on. And I just wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that for people who obviously haven't read the book yet.
Yes, absolutely. So I will say that the reason that Meghan and I were able to develop a friendship and work together in a partnership is because Meghan demonstrated humility, and she reached out to me, and she did the thing that autistic advocates are always telling people to do, is listen to autistic people, ask us, we know stuff. And Meghan is like, I'm going to do that. It's scary because this person was not very nice to me, but she sent me a message and she's like, is it okay if I sometimes reach out to you when I have questions about stuff? And I was like side-eyeing this. I'm like both like thrilled, over the moon. I'm like, oh my gosh, this parent is listening. And at the same time, kind of like, I know how these parents get sometimes when their belief systems are challenged. So I had to kind of get over that doubt and just be open to the experience. And one thing that I love about people is humility. Like that right there, when she reached out to me, like it melted my heart so much. And I don't think I ever told her that, but I was like, oh, but that's something that's really important. And we all need to have a little bit of humility when we're doing this work, because we're not always right. We don't know everything. And we have a lot to learn from each other. And that's relevant when we're trying to develop relationships with parents, or when we're trying to learn about different cultural differences within the autistic experience. It requires a lot of humility. Or when we're learning about, for speaking autistic people, when we're learning about the non-speaking autistic experience, like my experience is not the same as Danny's experience in multiple different ways. And so we both have the need to listen to one another and learn from one another. And that same is true with parents and non-parents.
Yeah, because I can't remember who it was now who wrote in the book about how it's very much an experience I've had as well in autism parent groups. You know, how they'll ask for advice and will take advice off people. But then as soon as the person discloses that they're autistic, all of a sudden the advice...
That's Kimberly's section.
Yeah. About how they're not taken seriously as soon as they say they're autistic. And I feel like there's always this kind of, well, you're not like my 7-year-old son. Well, no, I'm not going to be. I'm a 32-year-old non-binary person who was socialized as female and was undiagnosed and this and that, and like, we're not the same people. Why would I be like your son? It's such a strange thing to say. And I think there's also this idea about how, you know, if you're advocating online that you can't be a non-speaker. I've heard people say that, like, you obviously can speak because you can write or you can type, and I just find that beyond ridiculous. And it was spoken about in the book as well, about kind of, or at least I think it was. So
I think that is why our story is like kind of a blueprint, because I started off with those, like, that is how I was in the beginning. Like, I actually thought those things. I don't think I've typed them because I'm not, I mean, I doubt I typed any of those, but I mean, that is what I thought. Like, who are you, Jules, to be telling me about my kid when you can obviously think and you can obviously type and you can obviously have an opinion about something? Like, my kids can't do any of that, right? Because that's what I was told. I mean, that was the messages I was getting, and I didn't have anything to prove otherwise. And I think that's why we can actually say this is kind of like a blueprint, because it did start in that place. I mean, I've had my ass handed to me on several different occasions. Like, even after I found the autistic community, I'm gung-ho for, you know, learning from the autistic community, and I put my ego aside and all of that. I've still had my ass handed to me on several occasions. And look, I mean, once I put my ego aside, it was like, oh, well, that's fine. But like, you really do have to, like, it's hard because you have to hear harmful things that you've done to your kids. But you have to, like, it's hard to do that, because all of us, I mean, all parents cause their kids harm no matter what. But when you're faced with like 30 different people saying that was wrong, like, you should not be doing that because that's harmful. I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow. It really is. And I'm definitely a better parent for it, but it wasn't easy. It isn't easy to do that.
I think Christy Forbes said something quite similar in her chapter in the book, about how she had started off almost feeling like a therapist for her child, because
every moment is an opportunity for therapy.
Yeah, it's like go into this thing and go into that thing, and everything has to be like, but how does that advance their like communication and language, instead of just like being with your child and loving your child, and that will come when it comes. And I think a lot of parents get that, like, especially from my experience, it's just, you know, in the UK, trying to get a diagnosis for anything is an absolute nightmare. It takes forever. And if you're privately diagnosed, if a child has a private diagnosis of being autistic in the UK, that can't be used in a lot of schools to help them with accommodations. They then have to, having paid for and got the diagnosis privately, they then have to go get an NHS one for a reason that is completely and utterly bamboozling me. And I totally forgot the point I was going to make. But yeah, having been through all of those struggles, it's then, okay, well, this is your child. How are we going to fix them? And I feel like there's a whole multi-billion-pound industry on how do we fix neurodivergent people. And I think that's a theme that's definitely discussed throughout the book as well. And I just wanted to talk about intersectionality as well, because you said about the different writers and obviously coming from different backgrounds and different experiences and stuff. And I just wanted to touch on your Indigenous roots, if we could, Jules, because I've got to be honest with you, I'm very ignorant to. I'm going to suggest natives to Turtle Island. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, natives.
Yeah. So I would love to know a bit more about the experience of kind of Indigenous people in the USA who are also autistic. Like, is diagnosis a nightmare? Like, I can imagine it probably is.
Yeah. So the reality is that statistically we don't exist. Native kids who are autistic are often misdiagnosed. And like one of the most common misdiagnoses is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So it's a way to blame the parent, just like we used to do the refrigerator mother theory, where mothers cause their child's autism. It's the same for Native parents, but it's more specifically blaming moms for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So that's a whole thing. So we have something in the United States called the ADDM, ADDM study, and it's basically a prevalence survey. And they look at 8-year-olds throughout the country at different sites. And I can't remember exactly how many sites participate, but they estimate, how many autistic kids are there. And they break it down by socioeconomic status, race, etc. And in my state, in Minnesota, they found exactly 2 Native American autistic kids. 2 in the whole state. There's only 2, because my kid was 8 that year. Is my kid one of the 2?
Where is his friend? Who is this other 8-year-old in the state?
Who's the other one? Can we have a play date? Can we make this happen? But culturally, autism is so accepted as just a normal thing. Like, we didn't have a word for autism, of course. We didn't have a word for even disability in our native language. So the need for these words comes because of colonization and capitalism, and not because there's something wrong with the people. It's because you don't fit into the systems that we set up. So that's why these words are necessary, like autism and disability, etc. But I have at least one autistic elder in my family who's Native. He's no longer living, but he was not identified. He was never diagnosed. And towards the last few years of his life, as I was sharing my journey and what I was learning, he was learning from me, and he was figuring it out, and he never said it, but we knew. But he was always celebrated and loved, and he was never othered, and he was kind of a recluse. He didn't speak to a lot of people. He kept to himself, kind of just a really interesting person, an amazing person, and an artist and a teacher. And nobody ever looked at him and thought there's something wrong with him. He was always accepted for exactly who he was. And that's like part of our culture. But then when we live under colonization and capitalism and all that stuff, it's like, oh, well, there's something wrong with you. Must be your parents' fault. And so our kids are put into foster care. So there's a crisis in the United States, and it's about Native kids being stolen from their families and put into foster care into white families. And Minnesota has the highest rate of any state of out-of-home placement for Native children. And it is terrible. But our kids are more likely to get put into foster care than get access to an AAC device. So it's, it's beautiful within our culture, but under capitalism, it gets really ugly. So the money that should be spent on supporting disabled children, disabled Native children, and supporting families of disabled Native children isn't there. And instead, white families get a lot more money to steal our babies. I know there's not really a response to that.
Taking that in.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is kind of connected to what they call, sorry, you call it something different over in the States, fetal alcohol.
Fetal alcohol.
It used to be called syndrome. I think it used to be a syndrome. Now it's something else.
Okay. But they've kind of connected that possibly with I'm assuming there's a great dollop of misogyny involved in this as well.
Well, there was a movie that came out a long time ago that made that kind of assumption skyrocket. Wasn't there?
I think so.
I feel like I remember the movie, like when I was a kid or something, and it was like, I don't know. I don't want to
yeah.
But half of my memory that is there. I don't.
It feeds into those stereotypes, and I'm not sure if other countries have this stereotype of natives in the Americas, but there's a stereotype of drunken Indians, and so it feeds into that racism while also stealing our babies and blaming parents and all of the things. It's pretty ugly.
But white settlers brought alcohol with them. Have I completely and utterly misunderstood history? Like, we brought the alcohol with us. Then we completely and utterly destroyed somebody else's country for our own gain. And then, there's too much to unpick. This is just
it's like so much worse than that.
Wow.
So much worse than any describing words we could use.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and the same kind of stereotypes obviously affect Black, brown, and Asian kind of autistic people all over the world, presumably.
Yeah. Well, and as like here in the US, we say BIPOC usually because it centers the experience of descendants of slavery and people indigenous to the lands. So I know that it's different in other countries. Where was I going with this? Oh, so as we age, like those stereotypes hurt our families, but then as we age, then we're perceived to be like using drugs. Like autistic and neurodivergent people of color here in the US are perceived to be on drugs. Or, flapping is somehow perceived as violent or something like that. So it's not limited to childhood. It's a whole lifetime thing. There was a time, speaking of ADHD, I went to a psychiatrist because I'd been off of my ADHD meds for a number of years because I had a baby and I was nursing. And so you don't necessarily want to do that unless you have to. And I had a long history of taking a very low dose of ADHD meds because higher doses don't work well with my body. And so I went in and I'd already been evaluated at that clinic. Like, they did my diagnostic assessment. So they had my medical history, all the stuff. They knew that I wasn't taking meds for a long time. And then I went in and I wanted to start again. And he told me I was weird. He told me that I had to pass a drug test before he would prescribe my medication. And like all kinds of other stuff. And I was just like, what? I have like decades of medical history showing that I've taken this exact medication, except when I'm pregnant or nursing. And I've never been accused of abusing it. I have a zero record of substance abuse. And like, I don't say that with judgment for anybody who has struggled with substance abuse, but like, that's not part of my history. So there's no reason for him to treat me like that other than I'm a little bit more brown than he is. And I'm a light-skinned person, so I have a lot of privilege that comes along with that. But like, the clinic was close to a reservation. And do you know what a reservation is?
Yes.
Everyone. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was sketchy, but it's not just like a childhood thing. It's throughout your whole life, you're going to be treated differently within the context of your disability.
And the misdiagnoses, I mean, it starts like so early on. I mean, just what Jules was saying with that diagnosis, but also like with intellectual disabilities and the whole IQ scam that there is. I mean, like, I think I talked about it in the book that one of mine was diagnosed with something else because, the IQ was so low on the test. And it was like, I mean, it starts that early. And then, when you go up through school, you get the descriptors of violent, aggressive, and it is definitely more for Black and brown people, obviously, and males, and and it I don't know the word for this, but it contributes to that school to prison pipeline, that we have here, and they get in trouble. It's not that they need support; it's that they need discipline.
They're bringing back paddling in some schools.
Well, so I saw that. I did see that article, but I mean, there are like, I can't remember how many, but maybe 33 states now that never took that away, that use corporal punishment already.
Well, and they all do. They all do. They name it different things, though, like crisis prevention, intervention, or whatever. Like, so when my son got clotheslined by an administrator for running, that was corporal punishment. It's allowed in every state. They just changed the requirements for it. It's
and the restraint and seclusion. I mean, the seclusion rooms.
Yeah. We have very similar over here.
They're
in
everywhere.
The UK. There's a young man I work with currently who's been on a reduced timetable, they call them over here. So I think he was going into school for about half an hour, 45 minutes a day. And then they wondered why he was really annoyed, didn't want to be there, hadn't made any friends with anyone. He's going into school for 45 minutes a day. By the time he's got there, had a wee, put his bag down, he's got to leave again. And, as a young man who's 9, 10, and was restrained by 5 fully grown men. Like,
and the thing is, they don't have to tell the parents. They don't have to write an incident report. I mean, there was a woman in my state, her son was, I think, secluded maybe 800 times in 1 year. Was put, yeah. Just check out of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint.org. That, I mean, that parent, I don't know if the parent is still with them, but that's how that was even started. Like in my state, her son was secluded, I think, over 800 times in a year. And they didn't have to tell her. They don't have to tell you when they restrain them. They don't have to tell you what, it's horrific. It's horrific.
And then it's the trust of parents, like where on earth do you put your children? like what school is
so many
safe, let alone accommodating,
So many parents
kids out to homeschool. That's what I had to do. And then, well, we did that for a few years. And now I have one kid that I drive to a school 2 cities away in order to attend a school for Native kids. And it's an amazing school and it's definitely worth it, but it's a lot of time and money. And then I have another kid who's starting his senior year in another school. He just wanted to have that high school experience, even though homeschool was working really well for him. So he's going to a different school in a different city on the opposite way. So that's going to be fun this school year, driving around in circles.
Yeah, basically, by the time you've dropped one off, you'll just have to go get the other one. And yeah. Do you get? I don't know if you get in any of the states whether you get kind of help with transport to specialized schools or anything like that.
Only if they segregate your kid that much. I mean,
yeah.
So if it's the school saying like, oh, we can't accommodate your child here, so we're going to segregate them to this school 45 minutes away, they have to provide transportation. But other than that, I mean, this is Jules's choice, right? I mean, I'm using my quotation fingers for anybody that can't see it, but I mean, that's her prerogative that she's going to do. So no, they're not going to pay for that transportation.
Because I don't want my children assaulted. That's a choice, I guess.
Exactly.
And then you think of the people who can't have their children at home for whatever reason, and that's just doesn't even begin to be, in air quotes, a choice at all.
No, it's and that's the thing. I mean, it is not a choice that a lot of families can make. I mean, the pandemic, everybody came home, but that's because nobody had to go to work at that point. People weren't going to work then. But like, our families are struggling, and not like a lot of people do homeschool, but a lot of people cannot do that. And so like what I found is a lot of people that homeschool, they are still working to advocate for like, better, like improving the public schools. Like, I don't know a single person that homeschools that is not into like fixing the public schools or helping that happen. Because it really isn't a choice for them. Like Jules is not choosing to do that. It's necessary for safety.
And it's interesting about I think Jules brought it up earlier about the fact that when you were saying about doing activist stuff and kind of stuff locally, that most, if not all of that stuff is voluntary. And so interesting that those of us who can't be accommodated in the 9-to-5 world then do stuff that is also unpaid. It just and it's necessary stuff, and it absolutely needs to happen. And I think it should. We should be at the forefront of that, but it drives the able-bodied, neurotypical, or neuromajority kind of privilege, and creates a bigger kind of socio-economic kind of divide between us, because we're already not got a lot of money, and a lot of us can't work or do ad hoc work or part-time or whatever. And it's just, yeah, it's just furthering our kind of economic decline, if you will. And yet it's such important work that so many of us carry on doing anyways, actually a lot of us to our detriment, because I don't know if any of you have experienced, either of you have experienced burnout with your kind of advocacy work and stuff.
Yes. And it's like what you're talking about is like that pervasive devaluation of disabled labor. They frame volunteer work as community inclusion, where a lot of the times it's exploitation. It's an extension, or it's a reason why people justify sub-minimum wage. And I don't know if that occurs in other countries or areas of the world, but I mean, paying people $2 for a day of work. What? No. If you can't live off of the money that you're earning at work, it's not really, I'm not sure who benefits from that, to be honest. Like when it's a lot of the time it's framed as my disabled adult child needs a place to go during the day so that I can go to work. So they're doing this program and they have an opportunity to earn job skills and be safe, etc. And it's like, well, we can have day programs where they learn skills and have fun, and it's not basically exploitation. So what about if they have to be there for 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day? Why not the bulk of that day being the things that are self-directed, they enjoy, that are social, that are fun, that fill their soul and help them feel fulfilled, and then also give them the opportunity to work an hour or two at the minimum wage, or at least the minimum wage, or something like that, a market rate for the work that they're actually doing. Because if you were misrepresenting things, like it's devaluation of the effort and the work, and it takes away personal choice of what people want to do with their day-to-day lives, because we don't all need to work all the time.
We can actually enjoy ourselves.
No. And if a person is determined to be disabled to the extent that they aren't able to work, then why are we still trying to force the square peg into the round hole? You know, if we've determined they can't, if a person can't work, and I shouldn't say they, because I can't work a full-time regular job, but if a person can't work a full-time regular job that capitalism has determined is the ideal or whatever, then why are we making them do it anyway and just paying them less? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and then putting some shiny name on it, like, work experience, or, you know, and someone's patting themselves on the back somewhere. Someone who's actually getting paid a wage is patting themselves on the back, going, "Oh, didn't we do a good job for all the little disableds?" Yeah, it frustrates the living hell out of me. And I find, like, I don't know how right I am with this, and I'm sure you'll tell me if I'm not right, but like, I feel like disabled people are one of the few groups of people who constantly have this kind of thing happen to them, and nobody makes any noise about it. Or 9 times out of 10, parents and carers, this is not a dig at parent and carers, this is just facts as I see it, if you will, from my experience, are actually quite pleased that they're in these little groups or whatever. I don't know where I was going with that point, but there's, you know, like, you wouldn't have an Alzheimer's daycare where they all make crochet things and then somebody else is going to sell them, and none of the people who are in there are making any money from it. But maybe Alzheimer's is not the best, because obviously that's neurodivergence as well. It's not the best example, but like, I can't think of any other day group that people would go to where they're shown a modicum of potential money-ish and life skills that probably aren't actually worth that much.
Prison.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Christ.
Well,
Yeah.
and in certain countries with a lot of impoverished people, child labor, things like that. I
Yes.
mean, it happens, but it's a function of capitalism. It's like who has the least amount of power so that we can exploit them the most. So even like the makeup products that we use, the mica is mined by children who are making pennies a day to try and support their families, and they can't go to school. So I mean, it's a whole thing, but it's really about pointing out who has the least amount of power, who can we exploit the most, how can we make their existence profitable for us.
And I think that the day programs are just they're also like just an extension of the segregation in schools. Like the fact that we need a day program for this segregated group of people, and then we're going to exploit them and infantilize them even more. Like those day programs, and I'm not saying that they're all bad or whatever, but they should be like informed by the people that attend them. I mean, they should be planned out by the people attending them, and they should be, respectful enough to let them know like what are the choices and what are the benefits and what are the, like not telling them, okay, you're going to go get some job skills. Maybe they don't want that kind of job skill, right? Like I feel like there's a base level of disrespect in a lot of those programs that are just like, oh, well, you're going to come here and do what we say. But no, they're adults. These are adults. So like, that's just the experiences that I've seen at those places. And it's uncomfortable. Like, and I didn't have to stay. You know what I mean? Like those people that have to stay there, I mean, I feel like they should be the ones building those programs.
Yes. And then, like a lot of the pro sub minimum wage folks, they'll trot out a few clients who are a few people who have to work for sub minimum wage. They'll trot out a few that had a good time or made a couple of friends and like exploit that. They're not paid for advertising. But a lot of the time the people who are unhappy are discouraged or prevented from sharing their stories. So it's just more of the exploitation that happens so much.
I've got a recent example of that actually. I run social groups for disabled young people, and part of that I also coach wheelchair basketball. And the charity I work for was approached by an advertising agency on behalf of a like a big shop, a big store over here, and I'm trying to think of the word for it. It's a shop where it's got, I think you call them hypermarkets in the States, where they've got like loads of different things in it.
Oh, like a Walmart type of thing?
Store type, yeah.
A supermarket? Oh my gosh, I'm going to call it hypermarket from now on. I love it.
Oh, that's what. Oh dear. Yeah, anyways.
Like a big box store? Is that what you're talking about? Like where all of the things are in there?
Yes, like a Target or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what you call them. What do you call them?
A store?
Or a big box store.
We call them something different here, but I can't remember what the word is. But anyways, a shop that has all the stuff.
Store. I think a big box store or something.
Department store. We have so many different names.
Yeah, I don't know.
Stores.
Right. So, anyways, this shop is called.
Separate section about like a different episode about the way that we call things differently. No,
it's so hard. It's so confusing.
We're gonna call it the hypermarket from now
on. The hypermarket, because Katie has decreed and made it up, and therefore it is. Yeah. So we got the wheelchair basketball group that I run had an advertiser come to us from one of these big stores to say, oh, we're creating our Christmas advert for the telly and we want to have diverse groups on there. Perfect, gorgeous, I'm here for that. Then you read a bit more information and they're saying, oh, so what days would your group of people have free in September? It was. And I'm thinking, well, we meet on a Wednesday, so a Wednesday evening would be fine. And I'm thinking, well, they'll come down to us and want to watch us play basketball or whatever it is they want to do. Who knows? But basically, the short of it is that they wanted us to travel up to London. So I'm in Portsmouth, so that's about a 2-hour drive away. I don't think our travel expenses would be covered. The remuneration would go to the charity itself as opposed to the players who go up there. And we would have to have like costume fittings and makeup and all this kind of thing, and to take like 3 or 4 days out of our time and not get paid for it. And I just thought, who has written this email? Like, are you completely and utterly bonkers? Like,
it's a blatant disrespect. It's almost like you should be happy for even being invited.
What? Right, I'm not being funny. None of us have got time to go up and do this, not be paid for it, not be able to wear our own stuff, which for some of us is like a real big deal. Like, and are you going to know about how to create wardrobe for people who have amputations or have like scoliosis or like spina bifida and don't have hips and stuff like that? And I'm just like, the more and more I thought about it, the more I just drove me fucking mad, if I'm honest with you. It was so annoying, and I just thought, like, would you come to any other group? I'm wondering what other groups they've come to say, oh, you just come and spend 3 days in London, so we can film you, so we can go, oh, aren't we a good shop because we had all the good little disableds on and we didn't pay them anything. Of course we didn't. But yeah, it's just stuff like that that completely and utterly pisses me off. And like we're supposed to sit there and be grateful about it is beyond insulting.
Mm-hmm.
And I find the same stuff around kind of Paralympics and stuff like that. The superhuman, like, Olympians aren't also superhuman too, but we're only superhuman because we've overcome.
Is that like the Special Olympics here or something? The Paralympics?
Is that what they call it in the States?
I think so.
Yeah.
Even the Special Olympics, I mean, even that is just like,
that is not my wheelhouse. I don't know enough about it.
Patronizing the way. Yeah, it's patronizing the way that we call everything here in the U.S. Special. Like, and then you got people who insult other people by calling them special. Like, aren't you special? And it's just like, you know exactly like what people mean by that.
Yeah, what the connotations are of that. Just to actually get back on to talking about the book. Which I don't think we've done for possibly about half an hour now.
This is a very ADHD podcast.
What we're here for again?
So we've actually in our so this video obviously goes out to a lot of people, but there's like a hardcore, probably 100 of us who watch most of the videos week in, week out. A lot of us are writers, and we've got a lot of poets and kind of stuff like that. So I wanted to actually ask how was it easy to publish? What kind of avenues did you go down to publish your book?
I can do this first, Jules, if you want. So I feel like we kind of got a little bit of like a leg up on this process. I'm going to just be completely transparent about this. So the publisher, JKP, somebody from them reached out to me. And I think it's because of the book club and the book lists and like just the success of the book club. I mean, not that the book club doesn't make any money, but it just the sheer volume of books being sold and that. So the publisher reached out to me and asked if I had any ideas for writing a book. And of course I was like, yeah. And I like came up with 5 things.
Yes.
You know, like, yeah, sure. But this was one of them. And I think I had mentioned it to Jules, like, in passing at one time, like, this would be a great book to write. And then I pitched it to the publisher. And then that's what the publisher chose.
Yeah.
So I think that we had a leg up in that, the publisher reached out to us, so we didn't have to shop it around and get an agent and all that stuff. But I think that, like, JKP has like, they have open submissions most of the time where you can just submit your proposal, and they have like an autism and neurodiversity, like, line of books, so they're like really into that kind of thing. So that's one thing about JKP. But
so that's Jessica Kingsley Publishers for anyone who doesn't know JKP.
I couldn't remember for the life of me what that stood for, but yeah.
But they do a lot. I know Wen Lawson, Yenza Lawson as well. Yeah, Yen Perkis. Yeah.
Haley Moss is one that does a lot of writing through them. Haley Moss.
I believe Erin Ekin's book Queerly Autistic was through JKP as well.
Probably. And Rebecca Wood's books are through there. She does a lot of education books. And I'm trying to think of the other ones. Yeah, they have a lot of neurodiversity and that kind of stuff.
They have a lot of trans autistic stuff, which I love. That's my kind of thing. So, so they kind of came to you. So, do you think that you'd have kind of any advice for anyone who wanted to get into writing a book specifically for kind of autistic writers?
I mean, no, I don't have any. I didn't we had like a kind of leg up on that somebody reached out. Like, I don't have any advice. I don't know if this.
I have advice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how about with like editing or anything like that? Yeah, Jules, go for it.
So I'm gonna share the advice that Jennifer O'Toole gave me years ago. And Jennifer O'Toole she's written a bunch of books. One of them is Autism in Heels.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to an event where she was speaking, and I talked to her afterwards, and she signed my book, and I asked her this very question, and she told me, just start writing and people will listen. And so I just started writing. And so for me, having the Facebook page where I just started writing, like, people were drawn to that. And I'm like, I info dump about autism all the time, but I talk about other stuff too. And if you write, they will come. And then the publishers like it when people already read your stuff, because then they'll see, like, okay, well, we could probably sell a couple of books if we contract with them and if they write a book for us. So I think that's it. Like, just start writing and sharing. And it's scary as hell. It is so scary at first. And it feels strange. It almost feels like I'm a different person. Like, I'm just like a royal fuck up of a human. I just live my life and do whatever. And then I talk about stuff online. And then I hear that so-and-so follows your page, and I'm like, why? No, that's real.
You're really you're selling your Facebook page, mega. Yeah.
No,
it is so true though.
But it is true. It's kind of funny, but like, the most important part about writing is just start writing. Like, that's the thing. Just start writing. And then when Megan and I were actually writing this book, I have executive functioning issues, like, big time. So I needed Megan to be there along with me for the ride and, like, poking me with the stick saying, do stuff.
You know,
And-
it's bad when people need me to help them with their executive functioning. It's not a good situation.
But there were times that we would basically parallel play, or what do they call it? Body doubling, where we would both be writing in the middle of the night, like not even talking necessarily on Zoom or whatever else. And there was the occasional, like when we would be writing in the same document together, we go and like F up or comment on something somebody else had just been writing, but it makes it more fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I don't.
piggyback on that, Jules.
Yes.
So, like, all of what you said is the perfect advice. And I would also just say, like, just be yourself, like your authentic self, and like whatever passions. Like, don't think about what you think other people want you to write, if that makes sense. Like, you don't have to like sound experty on anything. You don't have to like sound more like you have more authority than you do. Because I mean, I think that's part of the thing for me was like, why would anybody read this? I don't have any letters behind my name, and I don't like, I don't know all of the things, and why would anybody want to buy something that I'm writing, or even like follow something I'm writing? But I think that's just a mistake of thinking, because that's what people do want to read. It's like people like them, if that makes sense. Words are not coming out as smoothly as before, but just to like whatever you're passionate about, because other people will find passion in like your energy kind of thing. That makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's strange because with the page I started, which I only started about a year or so ago, I think. Yeah, I felt like it was very hard. So I'm doing a postgraduate at the moment, and it's very hard to switch from postgraduate, what I like to call word wank, to like things that people actually want to read and can read and process and understand and actually care about on a very base level. And I think trying to find your voice is it's a lot of trying this and pushing that and seeing what happens when you do this. And I think some of the first things I wrote were just like, I look back at it now and think, oh my goodness. It was like amateur hour, and you just think, oh, but out there somewhere, someone might get something from it.
I think our most popular, like the most popular things we've put out have been of us sharing how much of a fuck up we are. Like of the things that we share, like God, you really, I'm gonna be British for a second, screwed the pooch on that one. Like, and people relate to that because I don't know. I feel like sometimes we feel like we're supposed to be putting on a show of like how together we are, how put together we are, when really that's not the people we're trying to reach.
And I think it's almost not necessarily internalized ableism, but there's a thing where a lot of us have been consistently invalidated and gaslit, and it's almost like we can't moan about things, like, because we're supposed to be these despairing human beings that, and life is tragic and hard, and, we're just supposed to go to work and go home and cry and then try again tomorrow, so talking about stuff that you actually enjoy is like almost peculiar to me. It took me a little while to get my head around the fact that I can actually talk about, so my page is called Autistic and Living the Dream, and it was from the living the dream was just a catchphrase. I get kind of palalalic and echolalic in the way that I say things. So it was something I used to say all the bloody time to everyone, probably annoyed the living fuck out of everyone. But, but then I thought I'm going to put it in my name because it's not like autistic and doom and gloom. Like I do enjoy things. I actually quite like the fact that I'm autistic, and there's a lot of things that are a pain in the ass because of it, and everyone else can be a dick. But like, actually, there are some of us out there who are actually like quite happy and content, and it's just the rest of the world needs to catch up kind of thing. But yeah, if you could leave people, if they had like one take home message from the book, what would you like that take home message to be? I'll start with Jules. Oh no, I'll start with Meghan. Oh no, we'll start with Jules.
I'm doing it, Jules.
Well, you're putting your hand up. Wow.
Yeah. I guess my one primary thing is like, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, so much of what we're unlearning and learning is uncomfortable, because we are genuinely all just weird ass humans. And this applies to allistic and neurotypical people too, is like, we're just weird humans and we don't know everything, and growth occurs when you're uncomfortable. So if we want things to change, if we want our lives to be better, if we want our communities to be better, if we want our children's lives to be better, we're gonna have to do uncomfortable stuff, like go on podcasts even when we just want to be invisible, you know. No, I'm happy to be here. I'm really uncomfortable in front of cameras. So
you could have had a filter. We would have been really
chat.
Oh, I didn't know that. If we'd known that at the beginning.
It's okay. It's fine.
Ben, who's doing our I don't know, technical stuff today, usually comes on as a potato, and Simon, who does some of our other videos, is usually an
Y'all are
ostrich.
gonna have to teach me how to do that after we're done.
I have no idea. You're gonna have to ask Ben. I have no idea, but yeah, Ben is always a potato. Yeah, and so I don't know if Meghan, did you do a take-home message?
So I guess my take-home message changes all the time, just as I grow and learn more things. So right now, I've found myself in my work with parents, telling them every single time to enjoy the journey. And just to expand on that, just get rid of that sense of urgency that you have, and thinking that everything needs to be done like right away, and there's a timeline and all of the things that people are telling you, and to just enjoy your kids. I mean, I do most work with kids, right? Because that's just my little niche. So I think it's just to enjoy the journey with your kids. If I was talking to parents, and obviously listen to autistic adults. I mean, that's the theme throughout everything, throughout the whole book, is to listen to autistic adults, but definitely enjoy the journey, because I don't see enough parents enjoying. I don't.
Yeah. Okay. And then I'll just actually, let's talk about where we can get the book first, and then I'll do our 2 final questions. So I Will Die on This Hill is available through Jessica Kingsley Publishers. So you can get that on pre-sale already through the usual business. Is that Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, probably Waterstones?
I don't know what that is.
Waterstones, that's a big shop in the UK. I dare say they're on there. Have a look for it online. You can get it pre-sale now. It's actually out properly in January 2023. Do you have a set date in January where it comes out, or is it just at some
I think there is one. I don't know what it is, though.
Yeah, it's January 19th.
January 19th. Excellent. That's my husband's birthday. So there we are.
Yay! I'm glad you already read it, so then you don't have to spend his birthday reading
it. Yeah, because obviously I would do that. That's
yeah.
Sorry, Jay. I'm reading the book. Okay. Right. So what would you say is your present favorite stim?
Still typing. Just typing. I get words or phrases stuck in my head, and I type it out over and over and over again on my head or on my fingers. But then, like, if I'm bored or if I'm tired or whatever, I'm just like type. Yeah.
My mom does that. She's one of those. This is mine. When I went to Minnesota with Jules, one of like my new friends there, John, I think, showed me these little these,
Is it?
and they're kind of, gosh, my poor fingers. They're kind of painful, but you can kind of roll them on your finger, and they got a little bite to them, so you'll like find like little indentions in my fingers all over.
Okay.
But they help me from picking on like biting my nails when I'm on camera with a podcast, and that's like not the best thing to be doing.
Yeah. Okay. So that's like a kind of metal ring that kind of adjusts a little bit, so you're rolling it up and down your finger.
Yeah, it's got a little bite to it, so you can kind of press it in.
I find with metal things, I always have a problem because I want to put them in my mouth. Metal stims have never worked out well for me. Just want to.
Well, yeah, I'm trying not to put my fingers in my mouth while I'm on camera.
What's that, Megan? I don't know if I'm supposed to answer this. One of my favorite things, I've spoken about this before, but I love just placing objects on my head. Like, it is one of my favorite things in the whole world. And now I have. Sorry?
You have a blankie?
Not a blanket. Sometimes I do. And I find like now I have more strange objects in the house because I have a little boy and there's toys and all these things. I had a little plastic frog on my head for the longest time, and I was so pleased. He didn't even notice it. He didn't even care. He didn't think I was funny or hilarious or anything, but I was still enjoying myself. So I've got my Rilakuma bear, and he's kind of got like a little bit of weight to him. I'm trying to put him in the frame, and I just love having him just rested on my head like that. And I find I sit there for ages and ages and ages with something on my head. I just love it. I don't know what it is. I used to love hats as a kid.
I really want to rub that thing behind you. I just want to go like this.
Velvet.
Yeah.
I don't know if it looks nicer than it feels.
Probably.
I don't know. Ooh. Right, now. Oh, God. No. Right, and the final question, the most important question of the day. What is your favourite form of potato?
There's no way I can. And you know what? I'm just going to answer this for Jules. I'm just going to take Jules' answer away from her because it's almost disrespectful. Almost disrespectful. I'm just saying. So I will take all of Jules' potatoes. My favorite thing of potatoes is Jules' potatoes because she's not going to eat them. I like all potatoes, French fries, au gratin, loaded potatoes with cheese, all the cheese, more cheese on top. I like potato chips. I feel like the guy from Forrest Gump when he's talking about the shrimp. That's me and potatoes. So I'll take Jules' potatoes, Jules' French fries. I'll take Jules' potato chips. I'll take.
Listen, potatoes. I've shared this before. Potatoes are just carriers for fat and salt. And that is a pro-fat and salt comment. An anti-potato. I don't like potatoes. I think
you should have done a trigger warning. Seriously,
like can somebody add that after the fact? Like trigger warning, just flash it on the screen. Potato hate.
Literally.
Finn is gasping in the comments.
Oh, gasps. Yeah, he is gasping.
No.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah.
You know what's funny is I'm part Irish. I feel like I am required by my genetics to like potatoes, and I just can't.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. What's he put? Warning, person that doesn't like potatoes. That's it. We'll put it in the trigger warnings at the beginning so that people know.
Okay. Right.
I've never had someone say they don't like potatoes. What is this?
It is really unfortunate, and yeah, it's really unfortunate. Yeah. We need an intervention.
And on that bombshell, shall we say goodbye? Can't believe it. Autistic and typing doesn't like potatoes. Thank you very much.
all.
Thank you for having us, Katie. This was so much fun.
You're most welcome.
Thank
It'd be
you,
really lovely to have both of you on again if you wanted to. I mean, I don't even think we touched about the book at all, but we can talk about other things, I'm absolutely sure. And you can use a filter, Jules, if you want to. Or you don't have to join us again if you don't want to as well. That's fine.
We have to make Jules a potato.
Yes.
That is outrageous.
That's law.
Outrageous.
Desensitize you to the potato.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Remember to buy I Will Die on This Hill. That's it. It's coming out in January. See you later.